Hello everyone, I'm Marie from Marie Quite Contrary. I just wanted to take a moment to personally connect with anybody who might be watching these videos. This year and the month of June in particular have been really difficult for everyone, and for me personally too. If I didn't have my garden, I honestly don't know what I would do to maintain my sanity. Being able to enjoy the natural beauty and the outdoors and to nurture plants and see them grow has been really therapeutic. Along with that, I've had many opportunities to connect with other gardeners from whom I've learned so much. I love the way everyone shares their successes and failures and encourages one another in this community. I think we have something really special here, and I just wanted to say that I appreciate all of you and your advice and comments. I'm thrilled to be a part of all of it. Thank you so much for being engaged with what I'm doing here. With that, let's have a look at the garden in June. So let's start with the west fence here that I share with my neighbor. This was last month, and here's present day. You can see everything has grown a lot. There's lots of big luscious leaves going all the way up to the top of the fence. In fact, I actually have to sort of direct them back down the trellis so they don't invade the neighbor's yard. Let's take a look at the Marketmore 97 cucumber. This was one that I bought after I was unable to get seeds to germinate. It's starting to flower, and hopefully we'll get some good pollination. My Swenson red grape is doing wonderfully. Got lots of bunches of grapes coming in. I'm going to get some protective covers for those because we do have a rodent problem here. The rosemary growing very fast and bushing out. The catnip growing very tall, not so bushy, but growing very tall and starting to develop flower buds. Next to that, we've got a little carpenter bee, a bumblebee visiting the Provence lavender. They seem to really like that. Behind the lavender is the Japanese honeysuckle, and it has been growing up this trellis in such a satisfying way. Each of these branches is just coiling around the vertical parts of this trellis, and it's been really interesting to watch. The Hail Mary pot is growing. There's probably some weeds in there now. I won't be able to identify until some flowering starts, but these are doing well. It's been an interesting experiment to just see how seedlings do when I sort of ignore them. And speaking of seedlings, I did try to sow some of the remaining flower seeds I had to see whether I could have some more success leaving them outdoors like that. They've done okay. I've got a few rows there coming in, you can see. And I had a row of poppies here that came in and then promptly died, so I don't know what the problem is there. This one hasn't had anything to sprout yet, and this one had a few sprouts, and then all of the rodents came and dug up all the seeds and the seedlings and ate them, so not great luck. This hydrangea has been amazing this year. It has so many flowers on it. It's nice and full, and it's just a rainbow of color. The flowers start out as kind of a pale yellow to white, and then they turn a little bit pink once they open. And some of them, toward the back where it's a little more shaded, have remained this light blue color. It's really beautiful. It was starting to kind of flop over and shade other things around it, so I had to tie it up to keep it clumped together. It has served as a nice screen in front of the compost bin and all of the buckets and pots and things that I keep behind it. Here is my westernmost brassica bed. I've got arugula here, one that has deigned to grow, and as you can see, it's got a little bit of leaf deformity on it and no real obvious insect damage. So what I suspect is compost contamination. I've also had a lot of mushrooms coming up here, and I'm just leaving those because I understand them to be beneficial for the soil. But as I was saying, I suspect compost contamination because when I direct sow things, they're not really doing very well. They'll sprout up like this little guy, and then they just turn kind of red and wither and not necessarily even die. They just sit there and don't grow. Now there's another small arugula, which is probably not going to make it. And I have a third arugula here, a wild arugula that seems to be doing okay, but it's growing very slowly. The radishes are doing well. I've actually harvested more than half of them at this point. Some of them bolted, so I've just been enjoying the greens. The fennel is really full and healthy this year. It did take a little while to get started, and then it just all of a sudden started to thrive, and I've been really pleased with it. It smells great. The ones in the back are nice and big. Last year I had a lot of insect damage, aphid damage on these, and this year that doesn't seem to be a problem. Over here I have some shiso, also known as perilla, which was sowed in place of some year-round lettuce that never came up. I've got a few of these coming up. They are growing extremely slowly though. I'm not sure if they're going to thrive, but it's a good sign that they're at least coming up. And I'm just going to let those do their thing. Back behind here I have the Copenhagen market cabbage. Such a wonderful flavor of cabbage. And oh, got a cabbage moth there. These are getting large enough now that the cabbage moths can land on the netting and insert their rear end through the netting and still lay eggs on the leaves. So I have to keep them kind of trimmed back and arranged in a way that they don't have access. I may need to rethink the hoops and maybe just do some vertical stakes. Over here in the adjacent brassica bed is where I've had the most issue, and this is why I really suspect compost contamination. I did no dig, so I just put compost about 2 inches worth on the top of the soil to let it kind of filter down with water over the course of the season and nurture the soil. And what I'm finding is that plants that were planted within that 2-inch layer, so plants that didn't have very deep roots, have really been stunted. This was actually last month, but these had already been in the ground at that point for about 2 months. So as you can see, not really doing a whole lot in terms of producing new leaves. And I found that plants that were a little larger when they went out seemed to be doing well. So I think that their roots have surpassed that possibly contaminated layer of compost. Oh, there's another cabbage moth. Goodbye. So these broccoli are starting to grow a little bit. I am seeing, besides the cabbage moths that got into the leaves that were touching the netting, I am seeing a few aphids and some whitefly. Now, whitefly I know is a huge vector for plant disease, so I'm wondering if that could be the problem in terms of the stunted growth. This is a Gailan or Kailan. It's a type of Asian broccoli, and that one was 3 months old and has not grown. This one I harvested the flower buds that it produced, and once I did that it actually started to produce some new growth. So I might try trimming these stunted ones and seeing if that encourages some new leaf growth and some new root production. But as you can see there, the broccoli on the end there differ in size quite a bit, the Gailan not so much. Now the kale have really thrived. I've got about 3 kale plants that have done well compared to all of the other plants in here. I don't know if these are just more resilient or what. On the left here is a kale that I planted about 3 months ago, and on the right is a kale that I direct sowed from seed. Oh, there's another cabbage moth. Goodbye. The one on the right I direct sowed about a month ago, and you can see it's already as big as the one that's been in the soil for a while. I don't know if maybe it's just a more resilient type or what. Down here on the end where I have the rainbow chard, these again were planted out about 3 months ago now. And this, in fact, I think I showed you this particular seedling last month, had just come up, and you can see it's still the same size. So clearly things are not growing in this soil. I'm giving fertilizer, plenty of water. I'm just not sure what the problem is. There have been some reports to the Department of Agriculture about farmers receiving compost contaminated with an herbicide, but it supposedly does not affect this particular plant family. I am a little dubious about that. Here are my peppers. The ones on the left are the same as their twins on the right, and you can see there's quite a size difference there. Again, it has the same 2 inches of compost. It could be the compost problem. There was some whitefly that got these early on, so they could be affected by disease. But you can see for some reason the ones on the side closest to me are much smaller and have fewer leaves than their counterparts on the right. The only real difference is there's a slight overhang just above from the eaves that kind of blocks rainwater, but it doesn't really have that much of an effect. They still get water. Over here, my poblano peppers are producing nicely. Those are just about ready to harvest. Behind there I have some padron peppers that are also coming on. These plants are a lot healthier in this bed. The ones toward the back are a little bit smaller, but still doing okay. There is a little bit of discrepancy, you know, between one and its counterpart on the other side. The strawberries have been okay. These were here when I moved in, most of them. They've gotten a little dry and hot. I'm not sure this terracotta pot is the best. These Mexican sour gherkins are really growing. They're almost halfway up the trellis now, and I'm really excited for these. I hope that they produce fruits this year. Last year I had a pollination issue. I didn't have enough plants actually to even hand pollinate. I'd have male flowers blooming at different times than female flowers, so I could never really get any fruits to grow. Here's last month what the Sow a Smile mix from Burpee looked like, and these were just scattered here, and you know, fingers crossed, and here they are now. They are a couple of feet tall. The baby's breath is starting to flower. The cosmos are getting some buds on them. There's some marigolds coming up through there and some other plants that I probably can't even identify yet, but it's looking really full and lush. This is a flower from the succulent pot. This is the red cobweb sempervivum. And there's one of the cosmos. The baby's breath. Anyway, it's just nice to have beautified this little corner a little bit. The ice plants, or Delosperma, have these wonderful pink flowers. Here's the wildlife area under the tree with the weeping birch. It has grown quite a bit. So let's see what we've got over here. Now back here I've got a whole bunch of unusual ground covers and probably weeds coming in. I'm just kind of leaving them because I like how it looks and they're not really invading other plants. The Italian flatleaf parsley is going to seed and kind of flopping over, as are a couple of the cilantro, but I've re-sowed some of them, so I should be getting some new plants coming in. The penstemon got really beat up by the rain, and so I put the pot there just to kind of prop it up, but it doesn't look very good. I'm probably going to trim it back and just see how it does. The Rudbeckia has at least tripled in size from last month. No flowers yet. The Campanula is flowering like crazy. I deadhead all the time and it just makes more and more flowers. The Coreopsis has finally bloomed and it's got bright yellow flowers and a really interesting leaf texture. My little yarrow back there is doing well. It's kind of flopped over from the rain too. Might need a little support. There's the yarrow flowers. They've just opened, looking really nice. Under the tree here are what look like a bunch of weeds. These are actually a beneficial insect attractant mix that I scattered here. This came from my friend who works on a farm in central Washington, and there's a mix of 16 different flowers here, some of which I already have around the garden, but I'm looking forward to those coming up. The tropical milkweed is full and luscious. However, it does seem to be suffering from some kind of disease or deficiency. It's got deformed and somewhat discolored leaves. Despite that, it is growing and it's getting ready to flower. So I'm really looking forward to those. The flowers on this thing are just so bright and sunny. I love them. Over here is my showy milkweed. These are growing fast. I'm hoping they'll get some flowers this year. Next door is really one of the highlights of the season. This is the blanket flower, or Gaillardia, and it comes in a variety of colors. It's mostly yellow with kind of a reddish center, but some are more yellow and some have a really deep red center like these. The bees have really been enjoying them. The hoverflies, I mean, they just get in there and cover themselves with pollen. I have had to support this section because the flowers were all falling all over into the path and I was worried about trampling the flowers and any bees on them as well. This is the Salvia superba, a nice deep purple color. This one has been very popular with the wild bumblebees in particular. This is the calendula that I grew just from scattering seed here, and it's doing well, growing pretty fast. One of them is even getting a flower bud. In the corner over here next to our deer skeleton that a friend scavenged for us is the Aster Monch, and it has probably died, so I've ordered another one to try and replace it. The Echinacea are thriving, and they've got flower buds on them. I'm really looking forward to seeing those flowers open up. Next door here we've got the lettuce pot that I planted up just from some lettuce starts that I bought. Most of the arugula had bolted, so there's only one left of those, but the freckled leaf lettuce is still in there. Back in the shade bed, we have the alyssum, full and bushy. The valerian is still just gigantic. I've actually had to stake it up to support it because the rain really did a number on it. Down here I've got my little Monarda that I was worried wasn't going to come back, but it seems to be thriving. Hopefully I get some flowers this year. And next to that I've got a Salvia Blue Victory. And I've got another one of those, actually two more I think down here. The viola is doing wonderful. It has survived the transplant to this spot and is doing just fine. Still producing lots of flowers and kind of breaks up the monotony of just having alyssum on that front border. There's another Salvia farruginea. Back behind these I've got all of this feverfew. I think I have 5 plants in there. They've all had to be staked and kind of lashed together because they were just falling all over the place from the rain. But they're producing tons of flowers and looking really nice. They smell good too. Back behind the feverfew is this little row of Phacelia, which I sowed from seed here. It seems to be coming in nicely. It's just now starting to flower, these nice little blue flowers. It also has a really interesting leaf texture, kind of furry. Over here is the Western Sword Fern, recovering nicely after being transplanted into here. It's now producing exclusively full-length leaves instead of the little truncated ones it was putting out before. The white alpine creepers back here are flowering and starting to spread. They are very slow though, so I'm probably going to experiment with some other ground covers in between these to see if I can get things to fill in. The San Marzano Roma has grown a ton. I've got it supported with a wire cage and string, and I've got a few clumps of flowers and even some tomatoes that are starting to come on. I am concerned about the rodents in the garden getting hold of these, particularly because it's my only tomato plant that I'm growing this year. Last year they really did a number on a lot of them, but fortunately I had 10 plants, so there wasn't a huge loss. Here's one of the marigolds that I sowed from seed. These are just planted kind of around the beds. There are some possibly weeds, possibly ground covers coming in. I'm not sure what these plants are. One of them kind of looks like a succulent. There's some blue star creeper in there. The clary sage is doing great. The new seeds that I sowed are coming up and growing. The onions are doing well. I've been harvesting from these regularly and they grow back. These boxes I still have not repaired. They are getting precariously saggy on the bottom, so I really need to take care of that, probably this weekend. The Greek oregano is getting ready to flower. The thyme has already flowered. The little German thyme that I had planted next to it does not seem to have survived. The stevia is looking huge and luscious. The pelargonium also thriving. Hopefully it'll send up some flowers soon. It has really impressive pink flowers. The chives are getting tall and kind of starting to flop over. Probably need to trim some of those. But overall they're healthy. I actually would like a little more chives in there just to make it more lush and thick. The dill has grown quite a bit. These are now standing up on their own. They don't flop over every time I water them, which is great. Over in the corner here, we've got the purple top verbena right next to the buddleia. And you can see that the purple top verbena has flowered a ton. It's actually starting to lose its flowers and will go to seed soon. And the buddleia is just putting on buds, so I'm hoping to see some of those flowers soon. I believe the color of these are magenta. Over here, the liatris is doing well. It's grown probably double from what it was last month, and a couple of the seeds that I sowed in here have sprouted. You can see it's got 3 little buddies here, just tiny, just starting to show through the soil, so I'm hoping those will survive and kind of fill out this box. The marjoram is doing well. This is the biggest I've ever been able to get marjoram seedlings to grow without dying, and they seem to be withstanding the bright afternoon sun. The tarragon is doing fantastic. It's really grown, and most of the seedlings have survived. The Gora is getting really tall. I've had to support it with some twine there so it doesn't fall over the path, and it is getting ready to flower too. It's going to be so interesting once all of these open up and I can see what their flowers look like, because this is a new plant for me. The ornamental allium has also put on a bunch of flower heads, and they're starting to open. That'll be fun once those open up. I know bees are really fond of those around here. Here is one final look around the whole garden at the end of June 2020. Thank you so much for joining me again this month. I look forward to showing you how things grow next month. Happy gardening.